And good evening and welcome to An Hour with the Candidates on LPTV, Libertarian Party Television, a production of the Libertarian Party. Dan Fishman, executive producer. My name is Pat Ford and I currently serve as the chairman of the Libertarian Party of Rhode Island. As always, we have a few purposes for this show. We want to give the libertarian community an opportunity to meet our wonderful down ballot candidates. If we've established nothing over the last few months, we can certainly come to agreement on one stunning fact. The future is now. For years, libertarians have clamored for that bench that could produce candidates at every level across the United States. We have a stunning assortment of candidates, offices pursued across these United States, literally in every single state. Our goal? By November, to have found a way to present to you every single one of them. And we're well along that way. We want to challenge the candidates, in a sense, to address lunch pail issues, the basic economics, the concerns of their constituency, and to do so through a libertarian perspective. Of equal importance, we want to create a bond between affiliates across the nation. These are challenging times in every political movement. We need to understand that candidates who tonight, for example, who are running for high office in New York and Arkansas are as equally important to the movement as the candidates in your hometown. But each of them gives us an opportunity to demonstrate to folks across the country at every level the philosophy, the work ethic, and the talents of libertarian candidates across the spectrum of offices. And I'm convinced that we will have successes this year, equal or perhaps even more so than last year. And as a result, demonstrate, and I always use these words very carefully, to all Americans the value of libertarians involved in governance. Two very special candidates tonight. One, a young man running for the United States Senate. And we'll find there's a little bit of drama in that. It's an unparalleled opportunity for the libertarian movement, not only to potentially win a United States Senate seat, but at the same time to take on an establishment Democrat on a one-on-one basis. Imagine that. Where that candidate is at, well, and we'll discuss tonight through the eyes of the candidate, where that establishment senator is at, a little bit of drama. No one can argue that the signature issue of the 2020 election season is criminal justice. Meredith Vacca will be joining us. She is running for a judgeship in the New York State justice system. We'll talk a little bit about, well, what's it like to run for being a judge as opposed to, very often in many states, there's judicial appointments. But again, the seminal role of the United States court system in interpreting judicial process for Americans at a time when racial issues and political issues have divided this country in a manner not seen really since the 19th century. So joining us first is Meredith Vacca. She is a graduate of Colgate University, a graduate of the University of Buffalo Law School. Currently, she is an assistant district attorney, a special victims trial division of the Monroe County, New York District Attorney's Office. She specializes in the prosecution of homicides of infants and children and domestic violence and children physical and sexual abuse cases. She's prosecuted over 30 felony trials, prosecuted over 2,000 felony and misdemeanor cases. She's been assigned to the Domestic Violence Bureau, Felony DWI Bureau, Rochester City Court, and town and village courts around Monroe County. Wow. Meredith, welcome to An Hour with the Candidates. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Hi, Pat. Thank you for having me.
And that's an astonishing resume. And it speaks to the type of experience that libertarians can bring to the table. This is a kind of a different conversation that we have with most candidates because of the special nature, if you will, of politics being infused into the judicial system. And I wonder if you could just tell us a little bit about those boundaries and at the same time maybe reflect on what it's like to run for a judgeship, which is a foreign concept to folks in so many states around the country?
You know what, Pat? It's a good question. A lot of people ask me on the campaign trail, why do we even run under a political party? Because judges are supposed to be apolitical, right? And we have to be apolitical. That's our obligation. But that's how the system is, at least for the state system. Federal judges are appointed, state judges are elected. So we run under political parties, but our obligations are apolitical. So there are a lot of extra rules. We are not allowed to give our opinion on how we would decide on a case. We are allowed to give our opinion on political issues, which is hard because that's what people expect. That's how other candidates do, and they want us to be able to tell them how we would rule as a judge. But what's really important is that we come into a case objective without prejudging a case. So that's why it's so important for us to really stick to the rules. We really talk more about our qualifications and our experience and how we would administer justice.
And it's fascinating because obviously we're juxtaposing that to the very public discussions, if you will, that take place when a United States Supreme Court justice is nominated. And, the term getting borked, for example, comes to mind because, the opposition party, regardless of who it is spending and investing enormous amounts of assets and time and energy in trying to find ways to sidetrack folks, to get them to commit on issues ranging from criminal justice, obviously, to the choice movement, to, on and on, whether or not they are an originalist, whether or not they are a strict interpreter of the Constitution. It's got to be confounding and at the same time highly challenging to address the voters. So, in that respect, give us a little flavor of what your stump speech would be. Let's just say you were addressing an organization of trial lawyers, for example, for whom I would imagine there is or isn't an important endorsement at stake.
Well, as far as my stump speech, I talk about what I've done, and I know you gave kind of a brief intro on what I've done, and I go into further what that really means, like the day in the life of a prosecutor. So, my job for the past, 13 years has been to carry out justice as an assistant district attorney, and my job for the past 10 years as a special victims prosecutor really has been to give a voice to people in our community that are the most vulnerable, people that often aren't listened to, children, victims of domestic violence. And what I do is I help them find justice. And what I would like to do as a Monroe County Court judge is to continue my commitment to justice. I think one of the most important things that a judge can bring is their experience with everyday people. And that's what I've been doing. As an assistant district attorney, I'm in the courtroom every day. I'm, doing research and writing, but really I'm out in the community talking to people from all walks of life. I talk to them about, really some of the more difficult things they've gone through. And so I understand those things. And I think that's what's really important. That's what I'll bring to the bench, is that experience and knowledge to make good decisions about people's lives.
So much of what a judge does is not only informed by, but dictated to by a state legislature. And let's talk about something like, and I just want to say up front, I want to be very careful here. If there's areas that we go in that you're not comfortable with, you just have to tell me. It's fine. I don't doubt that for a moment, by the way. But something like sentencing guidelines. Would you consider New York to be overtly prohibitive in the range of sentencing guidelines? And is that the type of question you're asked by? And is that also the type of question that's of concern, particularly folks in the urban core?
So I do not feel prohibited in sentencing guidelines. I think you get that in the federal sentencing guidelines. Federal sentencing guidelines are very detailed. Really, in the New York State court system, there's wide discretion that judges are given. And I'll just give an example. So let's say someone's charged with a B violent felony, a rape in the first degree. the sentence range a judge can give is between 5 years in prison and 25 years in prison. So that's a wide range sentence. A D felony, a judge can give a defendant probation or state prison time up to 7 years. So I do think in New York State, judges really do have a lot of discretion to carry out justice, carry out what they believe is fair in a particular case.
And so how much of that, and to folks like myself, we're not experts. We just play one on the radio, right? We've all seen our share of TV dramas, particularly the one that separates the prosecutors and investigatory capabilities by half hour, and then the next half hour is spent in the judges' chambers arguing the great issues of the day. Do you find yourself someone who is intuitive in nature in terms of combining your vast experience in prosecuting criminality and somehow gaining a sense of the individual that's in front of you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my intuition of what's fair, what's right has kind of developed over time, over the past 13 years as a prosecutor. You can give, I always say this, you can give 10 really good judges one set of facts, and each judge will come up with 10 different decisions as to what they think is fair. So my intuition has developed over time, handling all different kinds of cases, talking to all different kinds of people. And you kind of develop this gut instinct, I guess, this intuition of what is fair, of what you believe is fair, what you believe is right. And you bring that and you combine that with, of course, your logical analysis of the law, your research, and your knowledge that's more, I guess, technical.
In this capacity as the judgeship that you are running for election for, what type of cases will you be working on, and who will appear before you?
So as a county court judge, my docket would be primarily criminal, and it would be all felony level cases that occur within Monroe County. So felony level crimes being the most serious crimes, and that would include nonviolent felonies. So for example, possession of drugs, felony DWIs, all the way to murder in the second degree.
Wow. On one hand, the war on drugs has taken such a seminal role in our criminal justice system. Do you see that and you are the boots on the ground. You see everything. Is in fact drug abuse, is that central to criminality in the part of New York that you're in right now?
It's certainly an element of it, yes. As a county court judge, you would get a lot of cases that would somehow involve drug addiction or selling drugs. So that's definitely a big part of criminality. I think those kinds of cases, where there is no, I guess, quote unquote victim, you really have the opportunity to possibly give those people opportunities to, get help, get treatment, forge a better path in life. I just would add, based on my experience, I see one of the biggest elements of criminality as trauma. And I see trauma, actually, I think studies have shown it's one of the biggest indicators of the potential to commit crimes. I see this vicious cycle of trauma in the work that I do. I can't tell you how many times I've worked with children that have been raped or physically abused, and their moms have said, I went through the same thing. And you see it over and over again. And then I've been around long enough to unfortunately see the victims then go on and are arrested for a certain crime. So for me, I think that's the biggest thing that I see affecting people's behavior and leading to crimes.
There's a growing movement in this nation. Some will refer to it as restorative justice. As someone, again, who has seen the very best and the very, very worst of people, What are your thoughts on restorative justice, and what role, how would you define it, and what role does it take, should it take in the American criminal justice system?
So I see restorative justice as this concept of the parties, I guess, the person that's accused, the defendant, and the victims, trying to come to a resolution that brings justice. For example, sometimes they might have the victim and the defendant come together and try to figure out what can right these wrongs. In my work, we don't use restorative justice primarily because I'm working with children that have been abused, and those children are most of the time prohibited from seeing their abuser for obvious reasons. It's certainly something that's important in our criminal justice system, and it's certainly something that, as a judge, I would consider. I think that if the parties want that, I think that it's something that we could work at.
Mm-hmm. Across the country, there is the perception, and I would argue a perception that holds a great deal of validity, of in the halls of justice, as one Boston talk show host will say, justice is in fact in the halls. And so I want to talk about, if you will, the public defender system in your part of New York. There is a widespread belief that if in fact you are able to afford a superior criminal defense, regardless of your, degree of guilt, you are afforded a much smoother ride through the criminal justice system. How important to you is the public defender system, and what state is it in, if you will, in New York, if you were to grade it from an A through an F?
So I don't want to grade it, but I would say that our public defender system in Monroe County is extremely good and professional. Our public defenders are some of the best defense attorneys that we have in our area. And I get that concept. People think like, oh, if this lawyer is for free, then they can't be as good as this lawyer that I'd have to pay for. So I see defendants decide to come up with money to pay for a lawyer that maybe really isn't as good as the lawyer, the public defender that they've been assigned. So we have really good public defenders. I know more recently they have really big caseloads, and they've been able to, through certain programs, been able to kind of reduce their caseloads. My father is a private criminal defense attorney. So we've got a lot of really great attorneys that, are not only paid for their work through, from their clients they're retained, but they also do assigned work where if a defendant is, entitled to a public defender, but there's a conflict, then they get an assigned attorney. So that's how a lot of attorneys are provided in Monroe County.
Well, that's impressive. It's as an activist, my own particular viewpoint on it is that both the civil liberties attorneys and the public defenders attorneys are very much a product of the local culture. Here in Rhode Island, where I live, we're blessed to have a very, very strong tradition of attorneys working on a pro bono basis, expenses only, for civil liberties cases. Our public defender system is challenged not because of the spirit of the local legal community, but just, again, budgetary woes and the sheer amount of hours it can take to defend as a public defender a criminal case and the complexities of today's American judicial system. So that's refreshing to hear. Not only that it's strong, but that it's clear that you appreciate the importance of that. Now, again, you're running for office as a judge, and for example, where I live in Rhode Island, all judges are appointed, and imagine how that can work out sometimes politically. Generically speaking, separating yourself from Monroe County, do you think it's, and again, I'm going down roads here, but do you think it's a better system to elect judges, or do you believe judges should be completely free of the political system?
I was having this conversation yesterday with an attorney. I think that maybe in an ideal world, judges wouldn't run under political party. Maybe like a school board, and at least that's how we do it in New York State. They run without a political party. Mm-hmm. I think that might be a good alternative. You know, whether appointing judges or electing judges is better, you know, as you inferred, they both have their political, I guess, implications. So I really can't say that one is better than the other. I mean, this is what we have to do, and in a way, you know, what's good about it is that it makes us go out into the community. We're talking to people. We're talking to, I guess, our constituents, non-lawyers, getting to know what people want in judges, getting to know what people think, what justice means. And so I think that's very helpful. Judges that are appointed don't necessarily have that kind of opportunity.
New York is currently not a death penalty state. I believe it was in 2007 that New York rejected the death penalty. And it's been, I believe, since the 80s since New York State has executed someone. Please don't hold me to that. What are your thoughts on capital punishment as someone who has been through the system, hasn't had to work in that environment, but clearly capital punishment has become a political football and is capable of reemerging anywhere?
You know, Pat, that's a question that I cannot answer. I can't give my stance on that.
No, you're in a very unique position. We, you know, as libertarians, we come from a political tradition where everything is open for debate. You know, we're just, and that's got to be again one of the challenges. Facing you.
I guess, you know, what I would say to that is, regardless of my own personal political views, as a judge, it would be my job to follow the law. So whatever the law requires, that's what I would do.
That's an outstanding point, and it's a critical point, because the term "the law of the land" is often misunderstood at these points. There is a perception widely growing that judicial interference is something that happens everywhere and anywhere, but you are subject. Your decisions are obviously subject to appeal, and the law of the land is what matters. However you may personally feel about it. You know, it's if your work at this judge at this level is subject to appeal, does it go to the appeals court? What's the next level up in New York State?
So the next level up is the appellate division, and then the highest court in New York State is the Court of Appeals in Albany. So county court is a trial level court. So we're having trials, hearings. We're making decisions about sentences and suppression issues, things like that. So, and you know, I would just add, you know, talking about politics and law. You know, I think that the general public has this idea that judges are political. I think because it's so politicized in our United States Supreme Court issues, right? And the stories in the news. But really, you know, trial level judges, when you appear in front of a judge, you don't know if they're a Democrat or Republican or a libertarian. You don't know that. And I would say that, you know, truthfully, you can't tell from their decisions. Politics goes out the window, as it should, and judges, you know, bring their own personal experiences to their decisions and to the bench, but politics really doesn't play a part.
Excellent. Now, talk to us, if you will, about the mechanics of your election. You know, how many voters are we talking about? Is there? And we've had, thanks to your activist chairman, we've had a number of New York State candidates. I think part of this show's history over the last 3 or 4 months is that we've all undergone an intense familiarization with all the issues facing New York. But, you know, clearly you're in an area that's very diverse in its population, in its economics, and it's strictly on what type of municipality or town that is. I mean, you lurch from city to you know, complete rural in a matter of miles. What do you feel like you need to do to get elected? I mean, in terms of, you know, how many people do you have to get in front of in an age of COVID? How much is COVID a challenge to you? And of course, money and support. How can, what part does that play in a judicial election as opposed to, say, a conventional state Senate election?
Okay, well, I would say that obviously, particularly this year, our campaigns are a little bit more challenging, especially when it comes to fundraising and just getting your name out there. I recently competed in a primary for the Libertarian endorsement, as well as the Independence Party and the SAM Party and the Working Families Party. So I am the endorsed Democratic candidate. And so did the primary for all of those, the third parties. And I was successful in all of those races. So that puts me in a good situation right now to hopefully be successful in November. That being said, I need to, not taking anything for granted. And, obviously being a presidential year, who knows what's going to happen, being a pandemic, who knows what's going to happen. Raising money is hard because as judicial candidates, we are not allowed to ask people for money.
Interesting.
We're not allowed to even know who contributes to our campaign. And that is because as a judge, we have to be objective, we shouldn't be making decisions favorable because someone's obviously donated to us. So we cannot know any of that information. And so I rely on my campaign team to help me out in fundraising. So as much as I might like to right now, I can't stand here and ask people to give me money because that's against the rules.
Fascinating. And again, this is a perspective we haven't seen before, yet you are arguably running for one of the most important positions really in the state. You're the equivalent of your race across the state represents a combined impact on the lives of your constituents that is just can't even be defined. So that's fascinating. And I thank you for that perspective. So now, as I mentioned when we were talking pre-show, we would love to give you an opportunity, obviously muting the fundraising appeal, but the engage in shameless self-promotion. So while you can't ask for money, tell folks where they can find you on the web and your social media and just how they can get in touch with you and support you.
Okay, yeah. My website is electvaca.com, and I have a Facebook page, Meredith Vacca for County Court. I have an Instagram, Vacca for County Court. You can send me an email through my website, send me a message through Facebook. I'm very responsive. And if you're in the Monroe County area, you'd like to get a lawn sign, you'd like to help out, I would be very appreciative of any support.
Excellent. Meredith Vacca, she is running to be a judge. She's currently assistant district attorney and arguably perhaps the most challenging aspect of criminal justice law. And she's running with multiple endorsements also as a libertarian. And wow, that's challenging is perhaps the understatement in this case. So I would encourage folks to reach out to the Vacca campaign with all that's going on and do your best to provide, I guess, moral as well as boots on the ground support. Again, another one of a great field of candidates running as a libertarian in New York State. Our next guest has got, I believe, one of the most interesting races nationally that we're going to see not only as a libertarian, but really as an American. It's Dale Harrington. He is running for the United States Senate. And we've had some great senatorial candidates on Hour with the Candidate already. What makes the opportunity unique is, number one, his experience as an activist, as someone who's engaged heavily in the community, but at the same time, an opportunity to run one-on-one versus an incumbent Democrat senator. Let me tell you a little bit about Dale Harrington. He was born in the area commonly known as Arklatex. I've been there. It's a beautiful part of the country. He currently resides in Pine Bluff, Arkansas with his wife and 3 children. Their 2 older children are on the autism spectrum. His wife is a member of the U.S. Navy, currently serving on active duty. He graduated from Jefferson High School and briefly attended Kilgore College. At the age of 20, he joined the Adventures in Missions program at the Sunset International Bible Institute and was sent to Scotland as a missionary. That is a very young man, where he catered to the needs of a primary school as well as supportive of local elderly folks. He returned to Arkansas and attended Harding University, where he received a Bachelor of Ministry. During his formal education, he served at a psychiatric hospital and developed insights of the inner workings of our healthcare system. Again, another libertarian who is involved at the most organic level of a system that she hopes, in tonight's cases, to change, to improve, to really reconnect with the citizenry. He served in various pastoral roles and spent an additional 2 years as a missionary in China as a university teacher and a university hospital consultant. In 2016, he took a position as a chaplain and treatment coordinator at the Cummins Unit in Lincoln County. Mr. Harrington has dedicated his life in service to other people. He hopes, as we all do, that he continues his service to the people of Arkansas in his capacity as a United States Senator. Ricky Dale Harrington, welcome to An Hour with the Candidates.
Thank you.
Do we have
Thank you for having me on the show.
No, it's
Can you hear me well?
again. Yeah, we can hear you loud and clear. Let's. I want to spend a lot of time on you in the next half hour, but there is an interesting situation brewing, if you will. A United States senator made some rather off-putting remarks about that directly connect to the conversation we're having in the United States right now about race and racial justice. Can you I must just spend a minute or two, but it's important for libertarians to understand what's happening. What went down, as they say? What did Mr. Cotton say, and what are your thoughts as a candidate?
Well, Senator Cotton is running as a Republican. I'd like to clear that up just a little bit.
Oh, sorry, my mistake.
He's a darling. He's the darling of the Republican Party.
Right.
And recently, he was quoting the founders and saying that slavery is a necessary evil. So he says he was quoting founders. So essentially, by proxy, he was agreeing that slavery was a necessary evil. It'd be nice for him to go back in time or talk to my grandmother, who grew up in Jim Crow area, with all those laws saying colored people had to drink from this fountain, or colored people had to go in from the back, or they couldn't sit at a counter and be served. It just I'm just being straightforward with you. It minimizes the experience of African Americans in this country.
Mm-hmm.
Whenever a sitting senator can make a statement like that, saying that it was a necessary evil for the success of the country, surely we could have come up with something different for the success of the United States, rather than enslaving a whole people group and calling them property.
It was breathtaking at the time. His failure to even make a nominal attempt at walking back those words is perhaps even more breathtaking, as his historical, if you will, depiction how inadequate it is in terms of truth. Because even the founders of the nation at that time, even those who supported that's the quote unquote solution to coming together as a country and stepping, if you will, away from eliminating slavery at that point in time, understood in most cases how short term that would have to be. And despite many of them being slaveholders at the time, at least began to understand the true evil on so many levels that slavery obviously represented. What do you account for his for lack of better terms, just the stupidity of that statement, is failure to walk it back at some level? What do you think?
Well, if you take a look at President Trump, he's gotten away with saying a lot of things, essentially saying things that people are thinking, but the fact that he would say them and kind of get away scot-free has put it in the minds of some politicians that they can just say things that are reprehensible and get away with it. The things that Donald Trump said to Ted Cruz and his wife, or to Jeb Bush while they were debating. Yeah, people wanted to see that. They got so excited about it, and it kind of just started this little terrible cycle of I enjoy seeing other people suffer. That's what I think.
The term dog whistles is often used in politics now. If you're not familiar with the term, there are obviously frequencies at which only certain dogs can hear, and dogs then respond to it, which is a sly allusion to the fact that in this case, Mr. Cotton, as you put it so aptly, Mr. Trump often says these things as a signal many would believe to their base, as sort of on the wink, wink, nod, nod. Do you feel like that's the case here?
I believe it is the case. I think he is trying to channel some of the energy that President Trump has generated and funnel it toward himself. And just last week, I don't know if he was in New Hampshire or he was in Tennessee early this week. He's going around campaigning for other candidates rather than coming and speaking to his constituents here in Arkansas. So that type of behavior is pretty typical of someone who's kind of long range thinking in their political career.
Wow. But let's talk about you. You in your background, the term, words fail me in the sense of just how different your approaches to life and your backgrounds are. And what I mean by that is that your entire life has been a life of service to others, as opposed to power mongering, or in this case, fear mongering, or perhaps even behavior more loathsome. Talk about, if you will, the importance of service to you and what it represents to you as Ricky Dale Harrington.
Well, I'd first like to start off talking about an issue that I'm currently facing right now among some people who wouldn't characteristically support my campaign, and that's being a clergy member who's involved in politics. And that might seem very concerning for a lot of people because of how religion and politics can kind of mesh together and create this little three-eyed monster. And I would like to talk to people right now that I have my own personal beliefs. I like to share those with people, but I don't force them the way that it's kind of seen prevalent in our culture, that, or everybody has this horror story of somebody that tried to force religion down their throat, so to speak. But for me, my whole drive for helping people is my faith. And that's just the truth of it. I know that there are a lot of people that are in worse off situations than I am. And my faith dictates that I go and help people who need helping, because that's the calling that we've been called to in my particular faith group. I'm a Christian, I'm a follower of Jesus Christ, and we are taught to look out for those who are in need. I'm doing a shameless plug right here. In our religion, it says that pure and undefiled religion is looking out for widows and orphans in their distress. So that's the type of religion that I subscribe to there. And it led me to become a missionary apprentice, to go serve people in Scotland, serve people in China. And after I had a really rough stint there in China. And after that, I was ready to hang up those missionary shoelaces and try to help my own people. And that's how I got into prison chaplaincy.
Right.
And that was one of the most eye-opening experiences of my life.
what's your perspective as someone who serves the needs of, well, let's just say folks who have run afoul of our American judicial system?
Okay. One of the first things, as Miss Meredith was saying earlier about trauma and how it's a cycle, everybody's passing around hurt to one another. There's some preachers that say hurt people hurt people. And I'm not trying to make any excuse about anything anyone has done who is incarcerated, especially the violent crimes. But they did something to themselves first before they did something to someone else. You understand what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
They tore down their own humanity. They convinced themselves that it's okay to devalue other people's lives because they devalue their own life. And we have to try to figure out a way to stop that cycle. And it's better to deal with it on the front end than the back end through the courts and investigations where we already have a victim.
Does restorative justice mean anything to you in terms of your life and your ministry?
Restorative justice is something that I think we should institute in our criminal justice system. Instead of sending someone to prison for theft, it's a terrible thing, of course. I don't want nobody to take my stuff, so I don't take anybody else's. And I wouldn't want anybody to have their precious belongings taken away from them. But instead of sending that person to prison, we should keep them in society and make them repay the victim of their crime, rather than sending them to prison where they're susceptible to sexual assault, where they're susceptible to joining prison gangs, or there's people that never tried drugs before until they went to prison. And it's easy to find drugs there.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea of restorative justice is to give people the ability to handle justice amongst themselves, with, of course, the government being the referee there and making sure that someone holds up their end of the bargain. Kind of like how things are done in civil court.
And particularly for quote unquote nonviolent crimes, as Ms. Vacca asserted, it would appear that that would be at least on the first level, the first offense, it would appear that that would be at least an attempt to, while in a sense gaining some level of restoration to the victim. In your opinion, does that then give a greater opportunity to salvage a life as opposed to condemn one?
Yes, I think as human beings, we need to understand that all of us are going to mess up one day. You're going to make a mistake. When they were teaching us how to deal with inmates in our security class, they told us never say this to an inmate. Well, if you can't do the time, you shouldn't have done the crime.
Mm.
And it kind of dehumanizes them by saying that. And then it also creates an enemy for you inside the prison, where you don't really have, what's the word I'm looking for? Much protection. It's just your wits, and some of the officers carry pepper spray, chemical bursts on them. So you have to use your mind, you have to use your people skills in order to work together with the inmate population.
Mm-hmm.
And I think if people were given a chance to, I mean, there's something great about knowing that you could have turned somebody's life around, or you did or you didn't, but knowing that you extended that olive branch to someone whenever you didn't have to is one of the virtues of being a human being. You know, it's easy to throw the book at someone. It's easy to get your pound of flesh, but it's not easy to get a hold of your anger, to get a hold of the vengeance that you want for yourself, and say, well, you did me wrong, but I want to see if I can help you become a better human being. And I think it's I know there's more severe cases like murder, and I know that's very hard to deal with, but we're talking about restorative justice where it's not as severe as a murder case.
Mhm.
But theft, some of the crimes that are on the lower end of the totem pole there.
Property crimes, for example.
Yes, yes.
Mhm. How is this
Theft,
experience?
things like that.
I was saying, how is overall this experience? I mean, and again, in both of our cases tonight, folks, that we've got folks running for high office who've had astonishing levels of very personal boots on the ground, as I often say, experience in some of the most challenging, difficult aspects of quote unquote civil life, working with folks who are criminal, folks who have done desperately terrible things, folks who engage in property crime, and as a result, folks who are going to be incarcerated for at least some period and sometimes a very long period of their life. How has that informed you or shaped you as a libertarian?
Well, there are a lot of libertarian ideals that I have subscribed to since I've gotten in politics. The first election I voted in was John Kerry versus George W. Bush.
Mm-hmm.
And I was a Democrat then, but I still had a lot of libertarian ideals, specifically when it comes to government's power and how they administrate the power against the people. And whenever DHS was formed and the war on terror started, I was against those things. Even as a young man, I graduated high school in 2004. So there's some things that we're never going to agree 100% on. That's a part of being human beings. But I believe that the Libertarian Party has always been the party of civil rights. The other two parties, they jump on the civil rights bandwagon whenever it suits them politically. If you're going to be about civil rights, you need to be about it all the time, not whenever it suits you. My experience in prison, I will say this: whenever I first started, I noticed that there's a class system in the prisons, and it was the first time in my life that I experienced being a part of a class. We have a class strife here in our free world society, but inside the prison, you could see it automatically. Inmates pretty much are slaves in Arkansas prisons. I'm just going to state that plainly. They're pretty much slaves in Arkansas prison. And the interactions that I had with inmates, it really disturbed me with the second class citizen that they are now. Mm-hmm. Because they've done some terrible things. But as a society, we have an obligation to treat those who are less fortunate or under the care of the state, like inmates are. We have an obligation to make sure they're not mistreated, because if we can just treat them poorly, if we could just treat what's the word I'm looking for? What someone would say, the parasites on society, we can treat them poorly, then who's next?
Right.
And it reflects on the soul of our society if we can just cast them aside and treat them anyway. Because it's not too far from becoming what you hate.
There's a very thin line between those two. Serving in as many locations through as many different perspectives as you've had. And you mentioned things like Department of Homeland Security and that type of work. What are your thoughts on the war on drugs and what's become to be known in the civil rights movement as the pipeline to prison?
Yes, the war on drugs is a complete disaster. I believe it has harmed more people than it has helped. Sending someone to prison over a leafy green substance is not a just crime or a just sentence, in my opinion. There's a lot of money that goes into the coffers of law enforcement because there's just so much money involved in the drug trade. We've made a black market out of something that people probably wouldn't use if it was legal. It's just human nature. You tell me I can't do something, you better make sure I'm going to try my best to do it because you told me I can't do it. So that's just human nature right there. And I've talked to a lot of people about this, and they say, well, if you want to legalize all drugs, then it's going to be rampant. It's going to be everywhere. And I would like to say to that person, yeah, there's somebody that's just sitting ready to shoot up some heroin until they make it legal. Somebody saying, oh man, I can't wait to use it whenever they make it legal. And someone is they're going to use a substance if they really want to use a substance. What was the second part of your question?
Well, I'm just trying to get a sense of, the what we call the pipeline to prison throughout the country, and
Oh, yes.
I'll often on this show talk about Ferguson. The United States Department of Justice actually did two analysis of the events surrounding the riots and the unrest, if you will, unrest, I should say, of Ferguson, Missouri. And one of them obviously focused on the seminal events. The gentleman who was arrested, the actual steps that occurred afterwards, the actual physical nature of the violence, and then a second study was done into the environment in Ferguson, Missouri, in the run up to those events, and they talked about the feeling that the community had was that they lived in a police state, that police had an intrusive armed presence at all times, employing a variety of techniques that we now call stop and frisk, that largely the severity of the response to a perceived crime was based on racial issues as opposed to quote unquote criminality or criminal justice issues, and that there were two distinct clear standards of justice in the largely white outer suburbs versus, say, the minority majority community that Greater Ferguson had become. Clearly the war on drugs has precipitated a lot of that action, increasing enforcement and attaching criminal status to failure to meet civil obligations. All of that, folks loosely define as the pipeline to prison. In your experience in Arkansas jails, and particularly the unit that you currently minister to, how many of those folks started this path on some low-level criminality that just snowballed, for lack of a better term?
Well, there's a big social problem that we have going on that has ravaged the community of low-income individuals and people of color. With the advent of smart technology and smartphones, I've seen plenty of videos of some children being body slammed by a school resource officer. Surely that officer had the mental faculty to get that child under control if they were acting out. Better yet, why in the world are police officers being called to schools just to handle behavioral issues? And I said this in my interview on Reason. I have one more thing I want to say before I say this, after I say this. My oldest son, he is on the autism spectrum, and it's a severe, not really severe, but he's not talking. He has meltdowns or outbursts, and it's really hard to calm him down. And I'm thinking, if we continue on the path that we are continuing on, he might be walking down the street and something just upsets him, and somebody's like, "Well, this person looks suspicious," and call the cops, and the cop grabs him, and he kind of yanks back, and then the cop's like, "Oh gosh, I don't know what's going to happen," and then shoots him. That's a real concern I have, and there things like that have happened, and
Absolutely.
we need to find a way to help our officers do their job, let them feel safe, they can come home to their families. It's not about hatred of police. It is about making sure that those who have derived authority are held accountable for the power that they have. If you have the power of life and death over someone, you shouldn't exercise that derived power that you have willy-nilly. And I understand there's split decisions that can be made, but there's a better way.
Well, you bring up a point that I'm not sure that white America truly understands, and I loosely call it the conversation. I've been interviewing people on the air for a few years now, and in the last couple of years, I've interviewed a university professor, an elected state senator, a member of the clergy, and then a few young people who have had to have the conversation at a very young age. And this is usually very often from the mother for some reason. It just seems to happen. Where they have to, I'm talking about the age of 7 or 8 years old, have a conversation with their young sons about how to behave in the presence of a police officer. And the method that they teach them and how to behave is sort of a pure submission. And that's not out of any desire to submit to the police, but it's of the nature that they're worried about that anything other than pure submission will result in them being shot. And again, I'm talking about.
I know some people.
I'm sorry. Go ahead, buddy.
I know some people might not like Trevor Noah, but he had one episode. He was talking about Philando Castile, and everyone saw the video. And this broke my heart. Okay, that whenever he was shot, he was wearing that white T-shirt, and the blood was seeping out, just covering the white T-shirt. She had her hands on the steering wheel and still had the presence of mind to address that officer as sir. Yes and no, sir. While her lover is dying and her child is in the back seat, she still had the presence of mind to address an officer in that manner. Now, if that doesn't hurt you in your heart, I don't know how you can be reached. Now, I want to talk a little bit of something that's a controversy right now in our party. I want to talk to my libertarian brothers and sisters right now. There's this controversy about Joe aligning herself with BLM, Black Lives Matter, whether it's the movement or the organization, it really doesn't matter. Because what matters is that we deal with the issue of police brutality. If you get caught up on the organization or the movement, it's like, you can't see the forest for the trees right there. Or there's a dead rabbit that's going over here. I'm going to chase after that rabbit. I'm just being real with you. I'm being real as a Black man in America. I know what the issue is. I've dealt with it my whole life. And if we are not working together to fix the issue, and if you get caught on some little red herring over here, are you really interested in fixing the issue? And I'll appeal to my brothers and sisters in the Libertarian Party to not get caught up on some little simple argument over semantics. And let's get to work. Let's go out there and make a change right now. Let's set the old little petty arguments aside. Button up your shoes. Pull your pants up. Get out there and get to work.
Outstanding. That's outstanding sentiment. We really need to get out of this how many libertarians fit on the head of a needle environment where we simply exist within our own echo chamber and not reach out to communities, troubled communities, on the very issues that we obsess over when we're having a platform meeting. You know, we are fabulous as an organization at discussing those issues, challenging those issues, debating those issues. What we're, and I'm just going, your words said it better than I ever can. What we need to spend a little bit more time is on taking those beliefs out to the streets and affecting societal change.
Yes, sir.
A little less talk.
That's what we need to do.
A little less talk, a little bit more walk.
A little more walking. Yes, sir. And I need my brothers and sisters' help right now, because I'm running against Tom Cotton, who's threatened to send in the troops on people exercising their First Amendment rights, who said by proxy, slavery was a necessary evil for the success of the United States. We don't need anyone like that in our Senate. And I need you to help me get him out. He needs to get out. And we need to put a libertarian in our Senate. We need to get control of what's going on, get control of the executive branch's thirst for power. It's time for the legislative body to uphold their constitutional duty. And I need your help to let the people of Arkansas know, because everybody believes that Tom Cotton is running unopposed. The media said it. Newspaper outlets have said it. He's acting like himself. But I want y'all to know that I looked him in his face and I told him I'd be his opponent. And you know what? It's just me and him right now. And so I need your help to get him back in front of me again, so I can put the finishing touches on him.
Wow. How can we do that?
Well, you can visit my website, RickyHarringtonSenate.com, and contribute to our campaign. You can also follow us on Twitter and Facebook, facebook.com/RDH4Senate, number 4, and at Twitter, twitter.com, Ricky/Ricky, the word FOR Senate. And retweet, give us a retweet, give us a follow. Anything that can help us make a clamor and get the media to retract that false statement that has been circulating all over the place, where I can go to a protest and all the electorate believes it themselves that Tom Cotton is running unopposed.
Powerful stuff, my friend. Powerful stuff. Let's bring Meredith back up for a second so we can kind of bring folks together. Welcome back, Attorney Vacca. How are you?
I'm good.
You know, you both speak so eloquently as to the impact that both of your candidacies can have on the law. And yes, we're in the middle of a pandemic, its own unique, stealthy form of evil. But at the same time, it's clear that of equal challenge to this nation is its racial politics and its criminal justice system. Before we say goodnight, if Meredith, maybe you can go first, but give Ricky a sense of, from your perspective, of what your thoughts are about his campaign, and then Ricky, maybe you can weigh in on Meredith's efforts.
Well, Ricky, I enjoyed listening to your thoughts on a lot of these issues that I, as a judicial candidate, can't talk about. You know, specifically your thoughts on the criminal justice system, policing, the effects of racism in our community, and all of these issues are so important. And I guess I'd like to just end by saying, Pat, I appreciate what you said earlier, that, the spot that I'm running for is important. And I would just say to all the viewers here, wherever you live, I encourage you to look into your judicial candidates, because things that Ricky just talked about, our criminal justice system, racism, the equal and fair treatment of all people, no matter their background, no matter what they look like. Those are all conversations at the forefront right now in our country. And so definitely research your judicial candidates, because those are people that have direct impact on all of these really relevant issues right now.
Thank you so much. Ricky Dale, what are your thoughts on Meredith Vacca's campaign? It's a challenging one, because again, we can in a sense touch on the periphery of so many critical issues, yet in the another sense, by definition, the notion that justice is blind needs to be adhered to as carefully as possible at a time when so many national candidacies, including our presidential, the existing presidential inhabitant, if you will, Pennsylvania Avenue, is so bent on destroying the traditions, if you will, that give some level of justice and some level of support to our nation. What are your thoughts?
Well, it was interesting to know that in New York, the judicial elections are partisan. That's something that's different from here in Arkansas. They're nonpartisan races. And I appreciate very much Miss Meredith sticking to being, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, you gotta be objective as a judge. And right now in our country, I think the 2016 election had a lot to do with the courts. And as we do know that President Trump has filled up those courts. He's appointed 200 judges. And so a lot of us are kind of confused on how judicial elections are done. But I deeply appreciate the call to stay toward being objective and letting the legislative branch do its job and the courts do its job by carrying out the mandates of statutes. And we need more judges like that, like you.
Thank you.
Well, obviously our best wishes are with both of you, and you running the type of candidacies, the campaigns that both of you have demonstrated tonight. Not only serve the libertarian movement well, because our ability as libertarians to point to individuals like yourselves who are highly accomplished, highly dedicated, highly principled, but quite frankly, it's a time in this nation where we need a whole lot more of highly dedicated, highly principled individuals running for high office. As I always say, that the highest act of patriotism, just after serving in our nation's defense, is our folks like the two of you who are running for these type of offices, because the challenges personally, the challenges financially, the challenges professionally, the exposure it provides to one's family in a difficult, fractious political system at a time when our entire nation is under siege, both medically and philosophically, that type of commitment is amazing. I will always take this opportunity to point out that for those folks who might be cynical or maybe a little tired, a little shopworn maybe after years of fighting for the libertarian movement, I think that both of you, in addition to the dozen or so other guests that we've had on in the prior months, are proof perfect, if you will, of the rise of the libertarians, of the ascendancy of folks with philosophies that are ingrained in civil justice and the protection of the rights of the individuals. I can think of no better time to be more optimistic despite all the challenges we face as a party, of our prospects right now for the overcoming, if you will, of the inhibited state. Folks, thank you for joining us tonight. This has been an hour with the candidates on LPTV, the Libertarian Party Television. My name is Pat Ford. I want to thank our executive producer, Dan Fishman, who puts all the tech to this. These shows will be up on the YouTube Libertarian page as well as our Facebook LPTV page. We ask you to follow and share these because they are powerful opportunities to demonstrate to your friends, to your family, to your communities, the commitment that our candidates have towards the entire philosophical range of the libertarian movement. Folks are interested in joining us on the air. We've got next couple of weeks booked up, but I look forward to engaging with all of you. So just email us at hourwiththecandidates@gmail.com. I'd also invite you to stay tuned and go over to my other production facilities. Starting a few weeks ago, we started a show called Campaign Update, Joe 20 Campaign Update. Sam Robb will be joining us in his capacity as the head of the Pennsylvania Joe 20 campaign team. And he'll be talking tonight about some of the challenges, the issues, the opportunities he faces. And you can watch that show at facebook.com/The Coalition Radio. To our candidates, again, nothing but the best. We'll be staying in touch throughout the fall. And to all of you, thank you for joining us tonight. We'll see you next Friday, Hour with the Candidates, 8 p.m. Eastern Time on LPTV. Have a wonderful week.